afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Vantage Point. I'm your host, Lisa Hamilton. Today we'll be speaking with Public Relations Officer of the Guyana Elections Commission, and she'll be updating us on all elections related matters. So we're here with Miss Yolanda Ward. Miss Ward, thank you for being here with us today.
Good day, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
And as we begin, I want to get straight to the meat of the matter. How many parties are contesting both the general and regional elections, and where are we now along the process beginning from nomination day?
All right, so Lisa, as you know, on nomination day, which was held on the 10th of January 2020, 13 parties submitted list of candidates to the Chief Election Officer. After going through the detailed process of examining those lists to ensure that they have met all the statutory requirements, we have concluded that 11 of those parties are eligible to contest in the general and regional elections. However, 9 of those parties have been qualified to contest the general election, while we have 2 parties that are only contesting the regional election. So that brings us to the 11. But at the top of the ballot paper, it's ideally 9 parties in total that will be contesting in the general election.
Okay, and you mentioned that some of the parties would have been left out or eliminated because they didn't meet certain specific guidelines.
Correct.
Could you explain to the public what, just for an example, what one of them could have been?
So, for example, parties contesting the general election, they were required to contest in at least 6 of the geographic constituencies, or what we refer to as the administrative regions. So, if that's the case that they could not contest in at least 6, then they would not have been eligible to contest in that component of the election. In addition to that, they may have submitted lists of candidates to contest in 6 or more, but the requirements in terms of the number of candidates as well as number of nominators, they did not meet those requirements, and hence the lists being considered as defective. And once that would have been the case, they would have been given a period to correct those defects and resubmit. If they were not able to do so within the statutory period, then that would have allowed for the non-approval. I cannot say definitively, though, what is a specific case in those parties, but based on what is the legal requirement, those are the basics in terms of the list of candidates.
Okay. And we know that the next big day is Elections Day. Already a few experts have been arriving at the Commission to provide various forms of support. Can you tell us why it is that you would have requested this support?
This is nothing new to the Guyana Elections Commission. It is a very important component that is obtained historically. I think while internally the Commission of itself is very keen on dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, it would always be important to have external eyes that might be able to bring a different perspective for efficiency, and to ensure that we are in line with what the laws and all of that requires of us. So we have received some technical advisors in the form of Mr. Jean-Pierre Kingsley, who came through the Canadian High Commission. He has been providing that kind of advice and support directly to the chairperson of the commission. And joining him as well are 2 technical advisors from the Commonwealth Secretariat. As of yesterday, the first has arrived, Dr. Farijan, who is a retired senior electoral officer from Ghana. He is here, and his other counterpart, who is from India, Dr. Saeed, will arrive before the end of the month.
Okay. And we would have also read recently that the Carter Center is also mobilizing its team to help with the observation of these coming elections.
That's correct. So we have received indication from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that they have granted approval to the Carter Center, the European Union, the Commonwealth Secretariat, Commonwealth, and the OAS. So far as international observer groups. So Carter Center has already been on the ground. We've had several engagements at the level of the Commission, and so they're now in the process of really mobilizing their observation team to be present on the ground.
Mm-hmm. And what about the interest from local observers?
Well, to date we've had just about 15 or 16 local groups that would have submitted applications to the Commission. To date, being the 15th of January is the last day for the submission of application forms to the Commission, after which they will peruse, have their deliberations, and determine whether the groups will be accredited or not. So after they would have gone through their careful examination process, they will determine on as it relates to the accreditation of those groups.
And what exactly are these groups looking for? We know that the Carter Center will be here prior to the elections as well as afterwards to present their own report. But in general, what are these observer groups looking for?
Operational and administrative processes, implementation of activities against the work plan to ensure that we are on track, that they're monitoring to ensure that every subset will be in place in time for the election. Of course, monitoring the entire landscape as it relates to the whole political playing field. Providing feedback, of course, to GECOM and other stakeholders as it relates to the process. Observation groups in general also maintains a high level, looks for that level of transparency, and of course to the fairness and credibility in terms of the delivery and conduct of the elections.
And we know that between now and elections day, the various parties, they won't be dormant. Several of them, especially the two major political parties, are conducting rallies. They have their community meetings, bottom house meetings, etc. What is the Commission doing to look out for certain things such as language which speaks negatively to race or any form of hostility, etc., that we know is not tolerated during these elections or at all in Guyana?
Lisa, the Commission at the moment does not have a functional media monitoring unit. We are aware that the Ethnic Relations Commission, as a constitutional commission with the authority to do monitoring as it relates to ethnic relations, has begun the implementation and operationalization of a program to look at that, particularly as it relates to campaigns and rallies. We've had an engagement with the Ethnic Relations Commission, and so it is hoped that from where we sit through their monitoring, we can have a collaborative approach where they might be able to share reports and other information in that regard with us. But at the moment, the Commission of itself does not have a operational media monitoring unit.
But one would be put in place soon.
Well, I cannot say definitively that one would be put in place. This is something being discussed at the level of the Commission. Operationalization within the shortest possible time might be a good thing, but it's not one that has been concretized as yet.
Okay. And what is the role of the media in all of this? Because we know, based on how an article is reported, it can contribute whether negatively or positively to something that is ongoing. What responsibility would you say that the media has during this period?
Well, Lisa, I think the media is a very important stakeholder, not only during an election time, but in general. Of course, this is what you refer to as the fourth estate. Yeah. And so the public at large relies on the media for information. However, when we talk about the role of the media, I see it as broader than just the role in terms of channeling information. But I want to move that role more so to place an emphasis on the responsibility of the media in elections coverage. And I say that to say in the sense that during an election period, we are aware that sometimes the environment can become a very tensed one. And so it is important that the information that the media is channeling there to the public, that it comes against the backdrop of adequate research, accuracy, and so you do not have the whole sensationalization of that kind of information that can create confusion in the public domain. So the role information into the public domain, but the responsibility of ensuring that the reports are done along ethical lines and it has a balance, fair, accurate, and a very ethical approach.
And during our work in the field, various media operatives would have mentioned that they would come into contact with persons who still have their information crisscrossed, let's just say that. Where can these persons go, if not the media, to get this credible information that they seek?
I always you talk in GECOM related matters.
Yes.
Do not rely only as it relates to the word on the street, but seek to have the clarification from GECOM itself. We have 29 permanent offices across the country. Persons are advised to visit those offices or call those offices. Those numbers are all listed on GECOM's website. Even in the telephone directory. So you call the office, you visit the office, and seek to clarify whatever is the information you require. We've also published a number of numbers that persons can call the Secretariat to seek clarification, because we want to ensure that the public is as informed as possible. We of our own self, we have had placed a number of messages in the public domain through using our public service announcements and so on. But still sometimes people misinterpret messaging, regardless of how simple you can put that language, it might be misinterpreted. And so just to ensure that you're receiving that message very clear, it's effective. If you want to clarify, it's always better to come to the source of the information to have that clarity.
And one of the things that would see these persons visiting the various GECOM offices is the RLE, which we know is still out there.
That's correct.
Would you say that a lot of persons, well, that shouldn't be the question, but have persons been utilized in these offices to come in and check for the names, and how long will the RLE be out there for them to do so?
So let me just answer the last question first, in the sense the statutory period for the publication of the revised list of electors is 21 days. And so we would have published the RLE on the 5th of January. And so that will take us to the 25th of January, inclusive of both days. So persons are advised to check that revised list of electors, particularly persons who would have done transaction with the Commission during the recent house-to-house registration exercise, as well as the claims and objections exercise, to ensure that the changes you would have done during those exercises, it's reflected there. We want to ensure that there is no inadvertence on the part of GECOM, and so if it's a case where there has been an inadvertence on the part of GECOM, they can use this period to bring that to the attention of the Commission to ensure that the record is updated accordingly. As it relates to your other question as to whether persons have been accessing the service at the various offices to check their information, yes, we've had a number of persons who have been doing so. Also, monitoring our website, we would have recognized a very high volume in terms of the traffic to the site to check their information on the RLA. So persons are doing so, but we want to encourage more persons to ensure they utilize this period. After this period closes, we're moving into the publication of the official list of electors. And once that's out, there is no opportunity to have any kind of change done. Now, I particularly want to emphasize, Lisa, the fact that during this period, it is not for persons who did not do any transactions at all. So, while we will to ensure that your information is on the list, your name and the particulars are on the list, you cannot make any change in this period. This period doesn't allow for any changes to be made in terms of, let's say someone, you got married last week and you want to have a name change. No, this period doesn't allow for that. That will have to come when we do another claims and objections exercise. But this is for persons who would have had transactions done during the most recent registration exercises. They would have had changes done, but those changes are not reflected. It's the opportunity to bring that to the attention of the Commission for updating it.
Okay. So what becomes of those persons, as that example that you just give, as a person just got married and they had a name change?
Well, those persons will have to come to have that name change done during a claims and objections exercise. So when there is another claims and objections exercise, those transactions can be facilitated only during that period.
Okay. And can you also update us on the collection of ID cards? We know that since 2008 and years later, some persons have not collected their ID cards from the Commission for whatever reason. I think the last number I heard was 800 plus.
Yes.
Has that number increased?
Yes, we're almost at 1,000 now. So we've published a total of just about 18,000 plus. And we've only, the last update was that it's just approximately 1,000 of those ID cards that have been uplifted so far. So we still have to check the list on GECOM's website to see if your name is listed there. Alternatively, if you don't have access to checking the list, but you just want to check in with the registration office to see if there's a card there for you, it is the advisable thing to do. We want to ensure that persons are uplifting those ID cards.
And back to preparation with regards to GECOM, we know that recently we would heard that 2 commissioners will be traveling overseas to deal with the ballots. Could you explain the process that is going on there?
Yeah. Well, this is nothing new, Lisa. It's more of what I call a oversight of the production process at the plant where the ballots would be printed. This has always happened. We have a commissioner from both sides of the table who would be present to observe that production process. So it's nothing new at the level of the Commission, but it's just to ensure a monitoring safeguard of those ballots.
And when it comes to polling stations, how many polling stations can we expect countrywide?
Well, on election day, we expected to have just about 2,500 polling stations across the country. But as we also gear up for discipline services balloting, that would be an additional 60 balloting stations.
Okay. And what about the men and women who've been trained to conduct the various processes on election day? Are they setting up or getting themselves?
Well, we will have the swearing-in ceremony of the returning officers for the various regions, and so now that they are in place, their offices has been established, it means that they will get down to work in terms of their own staffing as well as the staffing for those polling stations. But we have completed, as we've been repeatedly saying in the media, the training of over 13,500 persons to man those polling stations on elections day. So we've completed that process, so the appointment of those persons will come very soon, as soon as the ROs are able to get themselves settled into their offices to get the work done. Because what we ensure that we want to have done is that these persons are in their teams ahead of time so that they will be able to conduct the necessary mock polls and all of that to ensure the efficiency of the respective polling station on election day.
Okay. And let's talk a bit about voter education. We know that this 2020 elections, a lot of young people will be voting for the very first time. What is GECOM doing in this regard to ensure that they know what they have to do on election day?
Lisa, as you would have noticed, we have started rolling out a civic and voter education program, more at the mass media level. We've started with an emphasis on the voting process, and to ensure people understand that it's a very simple process, particularly the first timers. It's nothing to be fearful of. We want to reassure people that their voting, their ballot is secret, and no one will know which party they're voting for. So we want to establish that comfort level way ahead of time, let people understand that this is not a complicated process. It's one that will be done in a very smooth, efficient manner, and to reassure them that their voting is a secret and it's highly confidential. So we've started more at that level of the mass media. And within the next few weeks, we will be getting out into the communities and on the ground. However, apart from GECOM's own civic and voter education program, you would have read that the International Republican Institute, the IRI, is also on board with GECOM to provide some support in that regard. So using a number of civil society organizations around the country, they will be working with GECOM to get the messages on the ground. Of course, Elisa, this is something that will be closely monitored by the Commission, in the sense that all the content that these groups will be presenting out there are content that we would have provided those groups with, and so we would have also had the opportunity of reviewing and approving those messages. We want to ensure accuracy as much as possible across the board, and so it must be a unified message. Whatever is the message that will be channeled through the voter education program, it's not one that will cause confusion to the electors, but they must all be on the same track and be ready to cast their ballot on the 2nd of March.
Okay, and before I wrap up with my last two questions, I must ask, on elections day, there are certain persons with disabilities, as well as the elderly, etc., who might have a challenge getting to various polling stations. To what extent can GECOM cater for these individuals?
Lisa, this has always been a challenge for us at the Commission. And while we have done several engagements with the respective societies representing persons with disabilities or the Society for the Blind, we have not been able to make much inroads in that regard, because a lot of what is required, particularly as it relates to the blind, requires more of a legislative step in the first instance. And so for us, it puts us in a position where our hands are tied. We understand the concerns of these persons, but at the same time, we have to be guided by what the law requires of us. And so until that happens, there's only so much we can do and no more. I must let you know that we are in discussions with some of these groups to see how best we might be able to facilitate them and make them very comfortable to cast their ballot on election day. As it relates of persons with disabilities, particularly those in wheelchairs and so on, to buildings, that is a very big challenge for us, in the sense that we have to utilize public buildings as these polling stations, and in many instances they're not built to accommodate that. As I've always been saying to the media, a lot of times we rely on the camaraderie of electors around the polling stations to help those persons to get up and get in to the polling station to cast their ballot. And so while we will be making every effort to ensure those persons are accommodated, it's their right, to vote, and they must be able to do so, we will try our best at the polling station to ensure that they're accommodated as much as possible to do so.
Okay, and my final question to you, what would be one, as PRO, what would be one advice that you would give to Guyanese? Obviously it's not in relation to who to vote for, etc. One advice that you would give to them moving forward into this elections period?
As Guyanese, as eligible electors, it is your constitutional right to vote. Vote for whatever party of your choice. It is your constitutional right to do so. And it is always important for persons to be able to exercise that democratic right to participate in that process to elect a government of their choice. And so in doing so, we want to ensure that for us at the Commission, that our processes, we want to assure the public that our processes are very efficient. We will ensure that at the end of the process, we have delivered credible elections, and we want to ensure that the environment, that we maintain a level of peace and transparency. So in that regard, I want to also urge persons to be informed as much as possible. Use their own conscience to determine the source of information that will be challenging to them, and should they have any concerns, that they should contact GECOM to ensure that those concerns are properly addressed. I want to urge persons to pay attention to the delivery of accurate information, and to choose the source of information wisely as we progress into this period.
Well, thank you, Ms. Ward, and there we have it. GECOM is here to assist with all the information that you would need. The Commission is available, the various offices of the Commission is available for you to check your RLE, and each Guyanese has a right to vote, and we're encouraging you here today to exercise your democratic right to vote for who you would like to see govern the country. I thank you for joining the Vantage Point here today, and please join us yet again tomorrow for another episode.